Hello, students. I hope you are doing well. Mm, all are in good health. So, today we have actually prepared a challenging and, you know, uh, an intricate passage uh, for us to, delve into it. Mm, And this type of passage is often encountered in exams like CAT, ZAT, or GMAT, isn't it? So that exhibits a high level of complexity. We can classify it as a difficult passage. So, what our agenda for today? It entails, or the agenda entails a thorough examination of the passage which is provided here. Second is called as we will start with what? Read the passage attentively. Then, after dissecting and comprehending each elements mm, that comprise, you can say that in a different forms. Once we have a solid grasp of its contents, we'll proceed to address several questions given to the passage or related to the passage. Okay, so before we jump into the text, I would like to also request each and everyone that you download the provided PDF from the link and attempt to solve it on your own. Why? Uh, because by doing it only you get the kind of difficulty and also understand the kind of means of problems that you are uh, facing with, isn't it? So while you are doing also, you allocate a maximum for 10 minutes time for this task, which includes your reading time also. Afterwards you can watch this video or watch the accompanying video. Please note that the video might be quite lengthy or quite extensive. However, I also encourage you to exercise patience and appreciate the uh, profound intricacies embedded with the passage. Without further ado, let's embark on this journey of exploration. Let's start this. Well, let's begin the text. We will first read the text and then after we will proceed for the uh, questions answer. But previous to that, we will come to know many of the different ideas pertain to this particular text. Let's go to the direction. What does the direction points out here? So the direction says that for reading comprehension, the passages given here are followed by some questions that have four answer choices. So read the passage carefully and pick the option whose answer best align with the passage. So definitely such kind of a direction will be provided in a kind of a reading comprehension. Well, let me proceed with the text. What the text starts with? The text starts with by saying that when deliberating upon elements for incorporation into my pedagogical endeavors, I have habitually adhered to a practice involving the retrospective evocation of my own predilections during the formative stages of my charges, while the retrieval of such recollections can indeed prove to be a task fraught with intricacies. Due to the alien nature of our antecedent cognitive states, certain silent aspects remain conspicuously vivid. I distinctly recollect that during the tender years, even during the tender years of 13 or 14, I harbored an ardent penchant for the discursive exploration of individual character. This predilection assumed an especially pronounced resonance within the tech context of an intimate cohort of schoolboys, with whom I maintained a robust camaraderie. So, such a uh, tough and also critical words are or vocabularies are given in this context. So engaged we were in the analytical dissection of our internal cognitive landscapes as well as those of our peers, albeit executed informally and reliant upon a modicum of psychological acumen. The substratum of these dialects lay in a genuine intellectual inquisitiveness. So, from the prism of my retrospection, this very inquisitiveness appeared to be a trait amenable to cultivation across an array of backgrounds and dispositions characteristic of the young male demographic. The third paragraph states that by virtue of my accumulated experiences, it has dawned on me that the investigation of character, particularly when illuminated through the prism of literature, holds an intrinsic magnetism for the nascent scholar. When immersing themselves within works, Shakespearean dramas in particular, students evince an ability to discern and parse the subtleties bedecking the variegated tapestry of character attributes. This ability finds its genesis in the premise that the entire spectrum of human character traits finds residence within our own psyche. The indomitable fortitude emblematic of King Lear and the sinister malevolence characterizing Lago lie latent within us relate to vestiges of a dormant quarry. Analogously, when undertaking an exploration of the oeuvre of non-dramatic wordsmiths, the attributes encapsulated by the dramatic personate or person resonate cogently within the presence of our personal consciousness. The visionary ardor as espoused by Milton, the trenchant indignation hardening swift narratives, and the tender benevolence punctuating Coleridge compositions are all facets of our being, occasionally submerged and overlooked during quotidian introspections. Yet, when artfully refracted through the prism of literary brilliance, these latent qualities come sharply into focus. This exercise, unraveling our inborn traits as mirrored within the portrayals of others, furnishes a perpetual engagement. Moreover, it underscores the inextricable intertwinement of literature life, and the fabric of our individual identity. Such a realization effectively dispels the often held fallacy that literature stands as an exclusive province of the select cognoscenti. So, this is the first page. And if you look into the second one, what the second one points out, if you look into the second one continues with that and stated another area of thematic terrain that has, in my estimation, exhibited a marked propensity for effective pedagogy within our purview pertains to the labyrinth of moral conundrums. Now, repetition of the word labyrinth, initially veering towards skepticism. My perspective eventually matured, acknowledging that the extent of a youthful mind's cognizance of the world is not necessarily tantamount to an impediment in the area of sagacious moral discernment. The ethical judgments of the young may may well be as keen edged as those orchestrated by their older counterparts. Illustratively, when tasked with pushing inquiries to a sophomore assemblage pertaining to the culpability of Hamlet in the demise of his uncle, coupled with the vacillation in the pursuit of retributive justice, the returns gleaned were notably sagacious and rational in tenor, frequently outshining the intricate explications proffered by established exegetes. These responses held aloft a beacon of what illumination onto the protracted, age-old debate that attains to Hamlet's underlying motivation. Then the next paragraph, fifth paragraph, what does it say? It merits mention that English literature, in its sui generis capacity, stands replete with a contemporary ideation. Certain critics advocate a metric of poetic assessment grounded in formal structural attributes, a perspective to which, admittedly, my own confidence does not evince comparable firmness. Notwithstanding, the ethical paradigms interwoven within our literature fabric prefer considerable input. Through the lens of reinforcing the resonance exhibited by these paradigms, agree to our individual moral compasses, we inherit in or we inherently augment the extent of a scholar engrossment within the corpus. Then the last paragraph pointed, let me elucidate that my intent does not pivot upon the proselytization of or transmutation of our pedagogical proceedings into those reflective of Sunday school pedagogy. Our pupils, it should be underscored, harbor no anticipation or predilections for such a trajectory. Instead, let us contemplate the illustrative scenario of instructing a work such as Macbeth. Within this framework, our proteges exhibit an appreciable acumen for comprehending the multifaceted variable that exert influence upon the actions of the titular protagonist, spanning a gamut ranging from constructs of honor and fiduciary duty to bonds of matrimonial allegiance. Their adaptiveness is in the subtle discernment between sentiments of self pity and self censure, alongside the demarcation separating guilt from remorse, stands testament to a level of cognitive maturation and a genuine intellectual resonance with the material at hand. So, finally, we have just completed the reading part of it, and we find out couple of questions are there, but let's go to understand this text. What does this so critical text tries to present the idea? Now, when you look into the text, what do we find out? The author or the writer is trying to discussing how they chose what to teach and how they believe students can learn best. So they often think back to their own interest when they were young, even though remembering these things can be complicated because people's thinking changes over time. However, if you observe that some important memories stand out when they were around 13 or 14 years old, they realized or they really enjoyed talking about people's personalities. How do you know that? Now, if you observe that in the beginning of the text, what does the author try to uh, point out? What is the main tone that you find out in this text? So, the main idea is the author talks about that the teaching approach, right? Because when he started with saying that when deliberating upon element for incorporation into my pedagogical endeavors. So pedagogical endeavors, so pedagogy means what? That's something called as a teaching, isn't it? So when you talk about pedagogical um, means endeavors, this means that the activities and efforts related to what? Teaching and education. So the author also continued by saying that what? I have habitually adhered to a practice involving the retrospective evocation. So when you talk about retrospective evocation, what do you mean by that? Now it indicates about retrospective means thinking back and remembering things from the past. That is what is known as a retrospective evocation, right? Or that called as a past influence. And when you talk about pedagogical endeavors, it's indicating about what? Uh, Teaching and education, or activities and efforts. Efforts, efforts. So efforts in a way related to teaching and education, isn't it? So if you look into that, these are the words are creating difficulties among the students when they read the text, and they feel like what? They're means they find out that passages are difficult or the text is difficult. So when we look into this, so we get the idea that the writer discussing at the first place that how they chose what to teach and how they believe students can learn best. So on the basis of that, means it started with the idea called as means my pedagogical endeavors, or called as the efforts related to teaching and education. So that's what he is means remembering to the past, and stating about my own predilection. So what do you mean by predilection? The meaning of predilection is called as a strong liking, or you can talk about preferences, right? Preferences during the formative stage of my charges. So formative stage indicating about early stage or early and important periods of development. So, while the retrieval of such recollection can indeed prove to be a task fraught with intricacy, so that called as a fraught with intricacy means called as a, with a complex and detailed aspects, and stating that due to the owing to the alien nature means something which is called as an unfamiliar quality of our antecedent cognitive states. Antecedent cognitive states. So what do you mean by antecedent cognitive states? It indicating about the way people thought in the past. People thought, people thought in the past, right? Thought, people thought in the past, isn't it? So certain silent aspect remain conspicuously. Right. A silent aspect means known as a what? Certain important and noticeable parts, right? Conspicuously vivid, which is called as a clearly and noticeably clearly, right? So he pointed also noticeably clear. I distinctly recollect that even during the tender years of 13 or 14, which means called as a the distinctly recollect what? That even during the tender years of 13 or 14, I harbored an ardent patent chant, right? So when you talk about ardent, right? So ardent means called as a strong penchant or liking for the discursive exploration of individual character. That's what is also pointed in the text in the beginning part. Beside that, also, if you observe that the main paragraph, you find out a couple of difficult words are there, but the first paragraph is trying to tell about when the author thinks about what to teach, he often remembers what he liked when he was young, right? So, and he was remembering those of the things is sometimes like a tricky because his way of thinking back then was different, but some important memories stick it out. So he distinctly remembered that when he was around 13 or 14 years old, he really enjoyed talking about people's personality. And that's what the author stated in the first paragraph. So the author clearly stated about what means the kind of a teaching or the efforts of teaching and education, and how means that happened in the writer's youngest time, when he was 13 or 14 years. So he was considering that what it was still there in his mind. It is still there in his mind. And he enjoyed talking about means, those of the things. In the second paragraph, the author also said this predilection assume, right? So if you observe that some of the words are pointed here, predilection, when you talk about predilection assumed or pronounced resonance, which is this predilection assumed and especially pronounced resonance within the context, which means called as a, they really liked exploring individual character. Who really means like exploring in an individual character. So that called as at that time the education and through which the students learned. So after that, it is also stated that means within the context of an intimate cohort of schoolboys with whom the author maintained a robust camaraderie. So what do you mean by robust camaraderie? Which means called as a strong strong and a friendly relationship, strong and friendly relationship. So when it is stated robust, which means strong, and camaraderie means called as a friendly relationship, right? Friendly relationship, isn't it? Friendly relationship. uh, so beside that, it is also said that means with whom I maintained a robust camaraderie, engaged we were in the analytical discussion. Um, discussion means called as a careful examination and examination of what? Of internal cognitive landscape, right? So, and then after he said also, as well as those of our peers, albeit executed executed informally and reliant upon a modicum of psychological acumen. So when you talk about modicum of psychological acumen, which is called as um, a little bit of understanding about how the means sharp man's mind works, right? So acumen means called as a sharp man, and it is also stated that means a modicum of psychological acumen. It's called as a little bit of understanding, right? Psychological understanding about how the mind of the human being works. The substratum of these dialogues, right? So it is also stated that substratum of these dialects lay in a genuine intellectual inquisitiveness, means called as they do have a real curiosity to learn and understand from the prism of my retrospection, from the prism of my retros- retrospection. So retrospection means remembering the past. This very inquisitiveness appear to be a trait or kind of a quality amenable to cultivation across an array of backgrounds and liking dispositions or liking a kind of a character, liking the kind of a character of the young male demographic. So later in the third paragraph, the author also said that by virtue of, so which is nothing but indicating about because of, isn't it? So, because of my accumulated experiences or gathering experiences, it has dawned on me that the investigation of character, which is called as a studying and understanding people's character or personalities, particularly when illuminated through the prism of literature, prism of literature, and then after holds an intrinsic magnetism. Intrinsic magnetism is nothing but called as a natural uh, attraction. You can say that it's intrinsic magnetism or called as a natural attract or attraction, isn't it? Natural attraction for the nascent scholar, right? So um, you can talk about nascent scholar is called as a young person who is just starting to learn more deeply, and when immersing themselves within works, the Shakespearean dramas in particular. So author here takes the name of the Shakespearean dramas. Generally, you would find out the kind of a drama of Shakespearean, which is particularly students events an ability to understand and parse the subtleties. So it is also said that subtlety is bedeking the variegated tapestry. So it is called as a bedeking and bedeking the variegated tapestry, which means called as a variety of complex collection of character attributes or character qualities. So you would find out the characters are coming out from that variety of means groups and complex in collection. And this ability finds its genesis in the premise that the entire spectrum of human character traits finds residence within our psyche, right? So it is also stated that the indomitable fortitude emblematic of King Lear. Indomitable fortitude means that called as a indomitable means unable to break. Break what? That called as a strength, right? So unbreakable strength, emblematic of king, which is called as example of King Lear, and the sinister malevolence, which is called as evil intention, characterization, lago, uh, lago lie latent within us, or called as a hidden inside us, relating to vestige, a vestige of a dormant quarry, akin to vestige of a dormant quarry, which is called as a similar to remains in a sleeping. Right, relating to vestige of a dormant quarry means relating to remains in a sleeping. So analogously or relating to when undertaking an exploration of the oeuvre of non-dramatic wordsmith, right? So oeuvre means called as studying the works, right? The attribute encapsulated by the dramatist persona resonate cogently within the precincts of our personal consciousness, right? So it is clearly stating about resonate cogently. If you see that when undertaking an exploration of oeuvre of non-dramatic wordsmith, that at the qualities which covered by the dramatic personate resonate cogently, which means called as something that make strong sense, right? So that is what it is stated. The qualities which covered by the dramatic personal or people means they carry nothing but a make strong sense, make strong sense, isn't it? So even it is also said that means within the presence of our personal consciousness, the visionary ardor, right, as espoused by Milton, the transient indignation adorning Swift's narratives, right? So you would also find out that and the tender benevolence punctuating Coleridge's composition are all facets of our being, occasionally submerged and overlooked during during quotidian during quotidian introspection. So when you talk about quotidian introspection, quotidian introspections, it's called as everyday self-reflection. But when artfully refracted through the prism of literary brilliance, or called as if you artfully means skillfully seen through the lens of great writing. So you what do you find out? These latent qualities come sharply into focus. This exercise unraveling our inborn traits as mirror within the portrayal of others. So furnaces a perpetual engagement. It's called as a furnaces or covers with a continuous interest. Moreover, it underscores the inextricable intertwined of literature. Inextricable intertwined means that called as a inextricable means called as a strong connection that can't be intertwined of literature, that can't be separated of literature, life, and the fabric of our individual identity. It is also stated that what now for it furnishes a such a realization effectively dispels the often held fallacy that literature stands as an exclusive province of the select cognoscenti. Select cognoscenti means it indicating to the uh, a small group of knowledgeable people, small group of knowledgeable people. So that is what it is stated, dispels the often held fallacy or mistake that literature stands as an exclusive province of the select cognoscenti, a small group of knowledgeable, means you can say that people. Now, next paragraph also said that another area of thematic terrain, another area of thematic terrain. So it indicates that that another area of you can say that of topics that has, in my estimation or the author's estimation, display a marked propensity for effective pedagogy. So propensity for effective pedagogy means that called as a tendency to be good for teaching within our purview, right? So, and then after it is stated, it pertains to the labyrinth of moral, labyrinth of moral conundrum. So what is this labyrinth of moral conundrum? It's called as a complex maze-like sets of question, which is a confusing one. And initially veering towards a skepticism, doubt, my perspective eventually matured, acknowledging that extent of a youthful mind's cognizance of the world is not necessarily tantamount to an impediment in the area of sagacious moral discernment. So when you talk about that, the author wanted to point out a complex maze-like set of questions and the kind of a tendency to be good for teaching, so which is nothing but a judgment about right and wrong, right? So that is what called as a sagacious moral discernment. It's called as a judgment about what is right and wrong. Uh, the ethical judgment of the young may well be as keen as those decorated by their oral counterparts. So, illustratively or describingly, um, when when tasked with posing inquiries to a sophomore assemblage pertaining to, um, what do we find out? It is stated that means sophomore assemblies pertaining to the culpability of Hamlet, which is called as whether Hamlet is responsible or not. So, as far as we understand that, when tasked the poaching inquiries to a sophomore gathered, sophomore means referring to the wise people gathered relating to blaming Hamlet in the demise of his uncle, right? Supported with a vacillation in the pursuit of retributive justice. Vacillation in the pursuit of retributive justice means so they are not sure about seeking fair punishment. The retorts gleaned were notably sagacious and rational in terror. So, sagacious and rational in terror means known as a impressively wise and logical, right? Sagacious and rational in tenor. It is also stated that frequently outshining the intricate explication proffered. What does it say? Frequently outshining the intricate explications proffered. Proffered by whom? Established exegetes, which means called as a, it is offered by experienced interpreters, right? These responses held aloft a beacon, right? Aloft a beacon of illumination onto the protracted, age-old debate to Hamlet underlying motivation. So it is also stated that in the fifth paragraph, it merits mention that English literature in its sui generis capacity means referring as a unique capacity, or suitable capacity, or called as the capacity which is unique, right? Unique capability stands replete with a contemporary ideation. Certain critics advocate a metric of poetic assessment grounded in formal structural contributes, or sorry, formal structure attributes, a perspective or a quality. So, to which admittedly my own confidence does not evince comparable firmness, notwithstanding the ethical paradigms the ethical paradigm interwoven within our literary fabric, for considerable import. Through the lens of reinforcing the resonance exhibited by this paradigm vis-a-vis our individual moral compasses, which is called as a compared to our personal sense of right and wrong, right? So it is also said that we inherently augment the extent of a scholar engrossment within the corpus. So scholars' deep interest in the collection of corpus means called as a works, isn't it? So now the last one it is stated, let me elucidate or describe that my intent, right? Uh, Let me elucidate means called as a, let me explain in more detail that my intent does not pivot upon the proselytization of our transmutation of our pedagogical proceedings into those reflective of Sunday school pedagogy. So the author wanted to say that what? Now the author wanted to explain in more details about change or transformation in the teaching style similar to the religious education, right? Our pupils, it should be underscored, right, and harbor no anticipation or predilection, right, for such a trajectory. Instead, let us contemplate the illustrative situation of instructing a work such as Macbeth, So Macbeth is called as a William Shakespeare's written one of the uh, means drama. Within this framework are proteges. So proteges means called as are young people. They are guiding, exhibiting an appreciable acumen of comprehending the multifaceted variables that exert or that forces influence upon the action of the titular protagonist. Uh, so titular means called as a main character. So spanning a gamut ranging from constructs of honor and fiduciary duty. So it stated what? A gamut ranging from construct of honor and fiduciary duty, which is called as the ideas of being honorable and fulfilling uh, duties. Fiduciary duty means fulfilling the duties and responsibilities. So to bonds of matrimonial allegiance. So connection relating to marriage and loyalty. So their adeptness, which is called as their skill in the subtle discernment between sentiments of self-pity and self-censures. So it's indicating that feeling of feeling sorry for oneself and feeling guilty, alongside the demarcation separating guilt from remorse, which is called as a demarcation, means clear difference between feeling guilty and feeling truly sorry. So alongside the demarcation separating, so make the difference guilt from remorse. Guilt from remorse means that called as a which one is a truly sorry and which one is called as a feeling guilty, stands testament to a level of cognitive maturation. So which is nothing but called as a cognitive maturation and genuine knowledgeable understanding with the material at hand. So on the basis of this complete means denotation of the vocabulary and their meaning makes us realize that the writer talks about what? Talks about how they chose what to teach. Sorry. Now, if I go for the means para by para understanding, then what I can draw here? Let's see that. Mm. Let's go to the first paragraph. What does the first paragraph pointed? If you look into the first paragraph, the author stated in the first paragraph that in a very simple manner, if I try to summarize the first paragraph, it stated when the author thinks about what to teach, when the author talks about this one, the first paragraph, when the author thinks about what to teach, he often does what? Remember what he liked and when he was young. and he was remembering these things. It's sometimes tricky because his way of thinking back in his past was different, but some important memories that stick out. So he distinctively remembered that when I was around, or when he was, right? When he was, yeah. So what does it say? Mm. So what does he say? Means he said that he distinctly remembered that when he was around 13 or 14 years old. So when he distinctly recollected that even the tender years of 13 or 14, uh, so if you're 13 or 14 years old, he harbored or he really enjoyed uh, talking about talking about what? People's or individual character. That's what it is stated. Uh, Even in a second paragraph, the author also said that means he especially liked to talk about what? Uh, Talk about this with a close group of school friend, right? Intimate cohort of schoolboy, which is given here. And then after he also said that how they had deep conversations about how people think and act. So um, that is what given. And then after he also said that means they had deep conversation. Um, they they are in themselves and in others, even though they did not do it formally and only had a bit of psychological knowledge. These conservations sorry, these conversations were about genuinely wanting to learn. So when the author looked back, this interest seemed like something that could work for lots of different young guys from different backgrounds. So that's what it is stated. Uh, Trade amenable cultivation across an array of backgrounds and liking characteristics of the young male demographic, or called as a young guys from different backgrounds. So in the next in para 3, it is also stated means because of the writer's experiences, he realized that means what? He said, it has dawned on me that the investigation of characters, especially through literature, illuminated through the prism of literature, holds an interesting magnetism. So, which is called as means is really interesting for new learners. When students read things like Shakespeare's play, they can understand and explain the different qualities that characters have. In William Shakespeare is taken an example. This is because all sorts of human qualities are part of their own minds. The strong courage of King Lear, we also find out the author stated about Shakespearean drama in particular, and stated about King Lear. It is also stated that they create the passion of Milton, the strong emotions of Swift, and the kindness of Coleridge. So these are all different characters uh, whose information is pointed here, isn't it? Now, after that, what do we understand? It is also stated that if you look into that, when immersing themselves within what Shakespearean dramas in particular, students evince an ability to understand and parse, right? Uh, students are the evidence actually, or they do have the ability to understand and parse the subtlety bedeking the variegated tapestry of characters. So, which is given here. So, if you go through the very and that's called as a simple meaning to this particular context, so we understand the author whose only thought is what? To present his experience. He pointed that when means he realized that studying characters, especially through literature, isn't it? literature uh, through which they can develop is really interesting for also new learners when they realized that means how the characters present in the literature give means present him important role when students read things like Shakespeare's play, isn't it? Shakespearean drama in particular. So, and also stated they can understand and explain the different qualities that characters have. This is because all sorts of human qualities are part of their own minds. The strong courage of King Lear and the wickedness of Lago are inside us. Means it is stated that the kind of qualities which you find out in William Shakespeare's plays, right? And taking example of King Lear, Macbeth. So he pointed that in society also you would find out this kind of a villainous character present in us, right? So when we read other writers' work, we can relate to the qualities of the characters they create. The passion of the passion of what? The passion of Milton, the strong emotion of Swift, and the kindness of Coleridge, all are inside. Even though you can talk about, they might not always notice. So you don't find out those of the character, right, which you read in the history, uh, that you may not, um, um, that they may not. The smart people, right? But they make us understand. The author also stated after this, okay, after this, that what another area of thematic terrain that has, or you can say that he also found that teaching about a tough moral question works well. At first, he was not sure if younger people could understand these big ideas, but he changed his mind, right? Because initially veering towards skepticism, his perspective finally matured, accepting that the extent of a youthful mind's cognizance of the world. That's what the author stated. At first, he was not sure if younger people could understand these big ideas or not, but he changed mind. Uh, but he changed his mind. Young people can have smart thoughts about what is right and wrong too. For example, when he asked a group of second year students about whether Hamlet was responsible for whether the you can talk about yeah. So he asked a sophomore assemblage. It's called as a group of wise students relating to the culpability of Hamlet. So culpability of Hamlet means called as whether Hamlet is guilty or not, right? Or Hamlet was responsible for his uncle's death. They had smart and reasonable answers. Sometimes their answers were even better than what experts say. These smart answers show that even young people can understand. Uh, you can talk about tricky question. So this is something which is pointed age-old debate that attends to the Hamlet's weakening motivation. Even in the fifth number of paragraph, it is stated that um, it merits mention that it merits mention that in English literature, in its sui generis capability. So the author wanted to point out in English classes there are many new ideas. So sui generis capacity is called as a new ideas. Some people think that they should judge poems by how they are built, right? Certain critics, you can say that um, a perspective to which. So some people think that they should judge poems by how they are built, but he is not very sure about that. Still, the important ideas in literature are about right and wrong. Looking at these ideas help us, uh, means help the people understand them better. This also makes students get more interested in what they are learning, right? So scholars' engrossment within the corpus, what they are learning. In the final paragraph or sixth paragraph, we understand. Uh, Let me elucidate or explain that I means the author does not want to change how they teach into something like Sunday. So it does not pivot upon means change. Uh, that the proselytization of a transmutation of our pedagogical proceeding into those reflective of Sunday school pedagogy. So he wants to convey that how they teach into something like Sunday school. And he also said that the students are not expecting that. Instead, let's think about teaching something like a Macbeth, right? Um, in that story, students can understand why the main character does things, like how loyalty and duty affect their choices, right? And then after, when they see the difference between feeling sorry for themselves and feeling bad about what they did, it shows they are growing up and really getting what they are learning, right? That is what given in the whole context. So overally, if I talk about that the main ideas of this text is nothing but the author talks about their teaching approach, right? Yeah. Mhm. So the author talks about what their teaching approach, teaching approach. Okay. Mm. Teaching approach. Mm. Teaching approach. So you can say that the passage is nothing but an educational one. So it is stated that the how the author talks about the teaching approach, also they how they remember what they liked when they were young, and believe that students can learn from their interest, and they find student can learn from their interest. So they find that exploring characters in literature and discussing moral questions engage students. So the author stated that how the youth or young minds can understand difficult ideas. The author also talks about the value of literature in understanding ethics. Ethics, you can say that, and moral dilemma, right? And moral dilemmas. Moral dilemmas. So, dilemmas. So, or confusion. They want to teach meaningful topics without making it feel like a religious class. Instead, they use examples from literature, like you talk about Macbeth, to help students understand the difficulties of human behavior and morality. That is what the whole text tries to make us understand. Now, if I go for the means discussion of some of the important points, like you talk about uh, the tone, you can also talk about the style of the passage. So, and also you can talk about what is the author's main argument, um, and also you can talk about what is the author's conclusion. All such kind of things will help us understanding the text, and on the basis of that we will be able to um, identify the questions answer beautifully. Okay, uh, let's see that. If you talk about that, as far as we understood, the author discusses their approach to teaching and the elements they include in their lessons. uh, you can talk about they often recall their what do we say that recall their own interest from their youth to guide their teaching. Remembering these interests can be challenging due to the unfamiliarity of past cognitive states, but there are certain aspects remain clear or vivid. Even during their early teens, the author had a strong interest in exploring individual character. So you also find out how the author believes that studying character, especially through literature like Shakespeare plays, the author also find moral dilemma to be effective teaching material, and how they note that the young minds are capable of profound moral discernment as demonstrated through examples like Hamlet's action. The author highlights the importance of ethical paradigms in literature and their resonance with their moral values, enhancing students' engagement. Now, let's say that what are the main ideas that we can we can create from this text? So the main ideas can be many, right? Let's say that. Mm, mm, yeah. So the main ideas can be what? You can talk about main ideas. Main ideas can be called as a the author uses their own past interest to guide their teaching. So guide teaching, guide teaching um, by using their by their using their past interest, isn't it? So that could be called as a one of the um, main idea. So even you can also talk about the main idea would be what? Remembering past interest can be challenging due to unfamiliar cognitive states. So we can also talk about unfamiliar cognitive states, cognitive, cognitive states, right? Or you can say the how the author had a strong interest in exploring character during their early teens. Um, means you can say that exploring character, exploring character. Um, so even a discussion about character were intellectually stimulated and fostered camaraderie among schoolboys. So he was also talking about camaraderie. Camaraderie means called as a how he's a strong bonding with his friends, right? Schoolboys. So that is what, and also you can talk about how character through literature, like Shakespeare play, is appealing for students. So you can say that that apples, play that apples, play that apples, uh, student, isn't it? Students. Even you also talk about human character traits are present within us, and literature brings them the light. So, what is the human character? Human character, human character, and also you can talk about um, how literature brings light. Um, Even exploring character through literature, connecting it to our lives and identities. Young minds are capable of profound moral discernment, moral dilemmas. They all are effective teaching tools, ethnic paradigms. So, you know, in all means all these ways, so we can find out the author tries to point out the main ideas. Okay, so let's go for the understanding the couple of important points here. Like you talk about some of the tones. Now, what is the tone that you draw out of this text? What kind of a tone you find out in this poem or this particular text? What is the style of the passage? So these are the means a couple of questions which also known needed to be understood. Why? Because if you're reading the text, you must have those of the means common things must be in your mind. Okay, well, well, let's go for the first question of this text. So, what is the question here? It is asked. So, the question is asked here. Uh, as for the authors, as for the author's exposition, as for the author's exposition, or according to the author, what primary impediment is encountered when endeavoring to recollect one's antecedent interest during their formative years. So, as per the author's exposition, what primary impediment? So, if you talk about that, what does the author or what is the biggest difficulty in remembering those early interest? Or the author talks about one's main problem people face when trying to remember what, what they liked when they were growing up, right? So, and what is that biggest difficulty? So, if you look into that, as per the author's exposition, what is the primary or means that called as a basic barriers? Impediment means called as barriers. So, is encountered, is met when fighting to remember one's early interest or antecedent interest or past interest during their formative years. So you would find out that mm, so what is the biggest difficulty that the people face when trying to remember what they liked when they were means in a means a growing stage, right? So that is what is the questions and easy understanding to the question, right? Now, if I go for the questions answer, so what is that? And we will also come to know about means which of the option that beautifully explain the means questions answer. Let's go to the first one. What does the first one tries to state? The interest bore insubstantial import, rendering precise recollection implausible. So, can it be the answer? If you look into the means this particular statement, what does the statement tries to tell us? So, the statement tries to tell us that the interest that we bore insubstantial. Two, question number two from the same text. Um, so, what the question it asks, what retrospections does the author hold regarding their interest in their or likeness in their nascent adolescence? So, retrospections means indicating about their teenager times or what recollection or remembrance or um, the ideas which he remembered during his teenage time or young teenager's time or called as a childhood time, you can say that. So that is what the kind of a question we find out here. Let's see that what are the answers it pointed. The first one, it is stated about a discernible aversion towards deliberations on individual character. Well, if you look into the first one is stated about a discernible aversion towards deliberation on individual character. It means it is indicating about the author means whether uh, it's stated about a kind of a negative thought. Discernible means think uh, did not think about towards deliberation on individual character means it is indicating about he did not like or he did not like thinking about people's personality, you can say that. So that is what option A is trying to point out. um, the author was actually really interested in examining people's personality, whereas the option one is going opposite to it when you are talking about a discernible aversion towards deliberation on individual character. So, discernible aversion itself is indicating that the author did not like thinking about people's personalities. So, therefore, we consider that it is inappropriate to um, the kind of a point which is given in option A. Let's look into the option B. What does option B say? a stance of indifference towards delving into the domain of singular character. uh, you can talk about that again. It is stated a stance of indifference towards delving into the domain of singular character itself is indicating that the author did not care about understanding someone's character deeply. So delving is indicating about uh, deep into the domain of singular character. So again, it is the same as option A. The author did not care about understanding someone's character deeply, whereas as per the passage clearly mentioned that what the author was really interested in examining people's interest or people's personality. So therefore, option B also is incorrect. Look into the third one. The third one is called as a uh, what does third one say? It's an intense fascination. Intense fascination is called as a deep interest rooted in the scrutiny of individual character. Yes, this is the answer of our question. So because the question says that what uh, ideas that the author holds during his um, childhood time. So we would point out that the idea is called as a intense fascination rooted in the scrutiny of individual character. So therefore, we consider option C seems appropriate to the answer of this question. So moving to the option D, what does it say? Though we know that option C seems appropriate to the question, D said an exclusive preference for non-dramatic literary pursuits. So option D is not stating about people, but stating about non-dramatic literary pursuit. It means it is indicating about the author only liked exclusive preference, no? So the author only liked non-dramatic books, right? Or he is interested towards that non-dramatic literary books. So obviously this holds untrue, right? So that actually the text talks about how the author had a strong fascination or strong fascination um, towards or for exploring individual character even during their early adolescence early adolescence. The matches with option C here, which mentions an intense fascination in scrutinizing individual character. Whereas we find out that option A, B, and D do not align with the author's strong interest in understanding people's personality. Whereas A and B talks about people, whereas D talks about author's interest towards the literary book. Therefore, we will go for the option C as our answer. I hope you understood this. Thank you. So let's go for the question number 3. So we have a means third number question from the same text. Uh, let's see that what the question it asks. How does the author portray the intellectual engrossment characterizing the colloquies of the group of schoolboys? Now, if you look into that question, so the question is given with a complex words, but the question is very easy to means, indicate that what or ask that called as a how does the author portray means called as a describe what describe the uh, intellectual engrossment or called as a intense interest the schoolboys have there uh, colloquies of the group of schoolboys. That's something called as a um, how does the author describe the intense interest the schoolboys have in their discussion? So that's what it is trying to say that what if we talk about this, then we can find out uh, how does how does the author portray means describe the intellectual engrossment means that called as their involvement in the or you can say that describe intense interest the schoolboys have in their discussion. So intellectual engrossment or intellectual discussion, where the group of schoolboys um, involve into it with the full of intents. How does that the author portray it? So किस हिसाब से author ने means जो स्कूल बच्चों का डीप इंटरेस्ट डिस्कशन के ऊपर है, तो उसको अच्छे से डिस्क्राइब किया है. So if you look into the first option says that the colloquies maintained a superficial veneer and lacked engagement. So if you look into the first choice, the first choice is trying to say that uh, the discussion, the colloquies maintained a superficial veneer and lacked engagement. So, is this the way the author tries to describe the intellectual engrossment that the group of schoolboys who are involved into it? So, if you see that, option A doesn't say that. Option A's meaning is saying that the colloquies maintained a superficial veneer and lacked engagement. It means the discussion seemed uh, called as a uh, shallow and not engaging. So it this option suggests that the discussion lacked the what engagement or called as a depth and were not interesting. However, the passage, if you read it carefully, indicates that the discussions had a genuine intellectual inquisitiveness which contradicts the option, isn't it? So therefore, we consider this option A is wrong because the passage says that mm, that called as these schoolboys have a genuine intellectual inquisitiveness or interest which uh, involve in their discussion. So therefore, but the option says that they lacked engagement and they do have a shallow discussion. So which is making the option going against the passage. Now, moving to the option B, what does option B say? The colloquies exhibited. So, the colloquies exhibited a formal and methodical demeanor. So, if you look into that, option B is trying to tell what? It tries to tell that the colloquies exhibited a formal and methodical demeanor. So which is indicating that the discussion, colloquy means called as a kind of a discussion which exhibited a formal and systematic. Methodical means called as a systematic approach. So um, that is what it follows. But at the same time, the idea is stated demeanor. The colloquies exhibited a formal and methodical demeanor, which is indicating that the discussion happened among the school children had a formal and systematic approach. But if you observe also passage, the passage does not specifically mention a formal or methodical demeanor. It does highlight the intellectual curiosity. It's not about the formal, it's about intellectual. Intellectual, isn't it? Intellectual curiosity of the discussion. So therefore, this does not align with the idea of being purely formal or methodical. So though you can consider, but at the same time, the idea of intellectual, right, going somehow called as a intense, right, intense discussion. And the question also stated about intellectual engrossment, right? Now, moving to the question number C. So I'm not stating that option B is wrong, but I'm not also considering it answer because it does not highlight what the question it asks. Now, let's see that after looking at the option C and D, we will choose which one will be the correct answer. Option C says the colloquies were underpinned by psychological tenets. So, which is indicating the discussions were based on psychological tenets or psychological principles, isn't it? So it is stated that what the discussion is all about. The discussion is all about psychological principles. Although the discussion might have had a modicum or called as a small amount of psychological insight, the primary focus was uh, intellectual curiosity, as mentioned in the passage. It would be called as a modicum. Modicum means called as a small amount, right? Which is present in the passage, modicum. So therefore, we do not consider this option. Uh, so is the answer. Now moving to the option D, what does it say? That colloquies were underpinned by a genuine thirst for probing intellectual topics, right? Now look into it. It is clearly mentioned the colloquies were underpinned by a genuine thirst for probing intellectual topics. So this highlights that the discussions were driven by a sincere desire to explore intellectual topics. This option actually closely matches the passage description of the discussion being underpinned by a genuine thirst for probing intellectual topics. So this goes with the um, answer options, right? Answer option. Um, so the passage highlights that this discussion were genuinely intellectual, inquisitive. So option D would be considered as the best choice because it accurately captures the quality or essence of the author's portrayal of the schoolboy's discussion as driven by a sincere desire to explore intellectual topics, which is the main point conveyed in the passage. So therefore, option A, option B, and option C are distorted and cannot be considered the correct answer. So option D would be the correct answer. Hope you understood. Thank you. So we have another question. Let's go for the question number 4. So what does the question number 4 here it ask? It asks us that according to the author, yeah. So according to the author, what pivotal role does the exploration of character through literature serve? Isn't it? So that's what it is asking. So if you look into that, we can draw the kind of idea कि author के हिसाब से what main role does the exploration of character through literature serve, or called as what important job does the author think exploring people's personality in literature does. So what is that important job? Pivotal role or called as an important job that the exploration of character through literature serve. So let's go to the options here. So what are the options here? It points out the first option is states here. No, option A, it substantiates the ideas that character exploration is confined to an exclusive cohort. Okay. So if you look into that, what does it try to analyze? According to the author, what main role or what main job does the exploration of character through literature serve? So literature किस हिसाब से लोगों का जो मीन्स पर्सनालिटीज है तो उसको किस हिसाब से वो सर्व करता है और किस हिसाब से हम लिटरेचर से उसको ड्रॉ करते हैं. So if you look into that, the first option stated that it substantiates the idea that character exploration is restricted to an exclusive cohort, or called as this option suggests that character exploration is only limited, as it is stated, no confined means limited to a certain group, uh, which is not in line with the author's idea actually. If you look into that, what does the option suggest? The option suggests that character exploration is only limited to a certain group and confined to an exclusive cohort. which is not in line with the author's idea that literature designs all readers with understanding character qualities. So it is considering an incorrect interpretation. Or if you talk about that, then we can say that option A says only some people can understand characters, but that is not what the author thinks, right? Okay, so in that case, we cannot consider. This is what people understand the character through literature. So we can consider option A is wrong here. So simple, very simple to understand that. Well, according to the author, what main job does the exploration of character through literature serve? So literature से हम क्या एक्सप्लोर करते हैं कैरेक्टर के ऊपर or what is the main job that the exploration of character means draw from the literature. So we find out that means option A is negating it. It says that it substantiates the ideas that character exploration is limited to a special group. So therefore, we will consider this option is wrong. Now, if I go for the next one is stated, um, it designs readers. It designs or it equips readers with an intricate comprehension of literary creation. So option B is trying to say that it designs readers with an intricate comprehension that called as some kind of a deep understanding of literary creation. That's what it is trying to say. So which will be true because the main job that the literature service is nothing but making the readers design with a deep understanding of the literary creation. So uh, or you can consider that the author believes reading helps us understand characters better, isn't it? So therefore, we consider option B is correct. But let's move to the other options also. So through the other options, if we find out something better or the best, then we will go for that. Option C states it facilitates the scrutiny of human character qualities uh, relate to the readers themselves. Now, this option is somehow indicating here the history, not really about what the author is saying. It says that it facilitates the ideas of human character uh, qualities relating to the reader themselves. So, reader reads about the character of the history, right? And through that, they try to relate. But authors, uh, the main job that the literature service nothing but deep understanding of the character in the literature. So, mm, so option C would be called as a part of the ideas, but indicating the history. So let's move to the option D. So therefore, option C considers wrong. Option D said it furnishes insights into the historical backdrop of character traits. So even this option also indicating about what it furnishes insight um, into the historical backdrop of character traits, which means called as it is also stating about the history, not really about what the author is saying. If you observe that uh, option D, again stating about historical backdrop of character qualities, could not be considered the main job that the literature serves. Whereas option C stated understanding different characters, but that is not the main idea the author is talking about. The main idea the author believes here that how it designed readers means literature reading designed readers with an intricate comprehension of literary creation. So therefore, option B would be the appropriate answer. I hope you understood the question's answer. So question is asked, what is the main job that literature serve through the exploration of character? So obviously, if you read the literature, it designs the readers uh, to understand the comprehension of literary creation in a deeply manner. Whereas option A, B, A, C, D are stating about D stated about historical backdrop, C stated about it is telling about the main idea, um, or sorry, it is telling about the understand the different characters who are related to the reader themselves, and option A is stated about means the character exploration is limited to an exclusive part. So therefore, we consider A, C, D are wrong. Okay, coming to the next one. Let's move to the question number 5. This is from the same text. So here, what the question states here. So the question gives the idea. Okay. So if you look into that, the question states about um, what stance what stance does the author adopt concerning the ethical judgments rendered by youthful minds? So, if you talk about what is the author's opinion about young people who young people's ethical judgment, right? So, um, that is what the question the author asked. What stance does the author adopt concerning the ethical judgment rendered by youthful minds? So, on the basis of that, we can talk about what is the author's opinion about what young people think is right or wrong. So, let's look into that option A. What are the option it points out? Youthful minds are bereft of the capability for moral discrimination. So, what does it say? Youthful minds are bereft of the capability for moral discrimination. Well, if I look into that, um, it is not that what the author said that the youthful minds are bereft of the capability, or um, if you look into the passage, the author disagrees and stated that young minds can make moral choices. Right? It is not that young minds are bereft of the capability or stay away from capability for moral discrimination. So that is not what youthful minds are bereft of the capability of moral discrimination. Is something called as a contradicts to the author's stance. The author believes young minds are what capable of showing moral discrimination, uh, as evidenced by the kind of knowledge they do have. Like when the author discuss about Hamlet, when the author discussed about the Hamlet, the author stated that what the author stated that young minds are capable enough of showing moral discriminations. Why? Now, because uh, the author stated about the sophomores also in the passage. So, sophomores, Hamlet gives the evidence of that youthful mind or means young people are capable enough of showing moral discrimination, right? That is what option A is going against of it, so therefore we consider it is the wrong options, right? So A cannot be, because authors the question statement is called as what does the author adopt concerning the ethical judgment caused by the youthful mind? So, young age people cons- consider what? Consider means or about young age people, what is the author's opinion? So, author's opinion is what? Now, young age people are capable enough for moral discrimination, but not like they are means avoiding the capability of moral discrimination. So, which is uh, incorrecting. incorrect the answer option. So if you look into the in the passage, it gives the evidence called as a Sophomores Hamlet, suggests that how young people are means capable enough of moral discrimination. Now moving to the option B, what does the option B stated? The ethical judgments of the young often betray misdirection and impracticality. Now, if you look into that, we find out the ethical judgment of the young, right? So the author's viewpoint is somehow called as a more positive, actually, right? The author's viewpoint is nothing but more positive. The author sees the potential for wise moral judgments in young minds, as demonstrated by Sophomores' discussion of Hamlet. Like we will choose the same lines in the passage. So what does it say? It tries to discuss about that the author believes what the ethical judgment of the young often um, not betray misdirection and impracticality. It is something called as a um, something it is something called as a author's viewpoint, which is a positive one, not the negative. The author sees the ability for wise moral judgment in young minds, as demonstrated by the Sophomores' discussion of Hamlet. Okay, so therefore, but option B is clearly presenting a negative tone out of that. So option A and B are negative in the context. So whereas the question's answer will be positive in knowledge or positive in nature. Look at the option C. Young minds are designed to uh, display sagacious moral discrimination. Sagacious moral discrimination. Now, what is it stated? Uh, if you look into that, the means option C, which is doing what? Night aligns. What does it aligns? It aligns with the author's goal that young minds can demonstrate wise moral discrimination. Wise moral discrimination. So sagacious means called as a wise moral discussion. Um, wise moral discrimination as demonstrated by the Sophomores' engagement with Hamlet's culpability, right? So in that context, we talk about that option C would be a correct answer to it. But at the same time, uh, the author believes that young minds can make the ethical judgment as evident in Sophomores' Hamlet discussion. It is also the answer that contrasts to the option A and option B, right? Because A and B are pointing the negative idea, whereas option C makes a kind of a sense here. Okay, now moving to the next one, the option D. Let's see that if the option D is better than C or not. So option D is trying to say ethical judgments by the hold hold diminished significance compared to those of adults. Now, if you look into the option D stated ethical judgments by the young hold diminished significance compared to those of adults. So the author does not hold this view. The author does not hold this view. The author believes that young minds can have means deep or acumen moral judgment, as as seen in the discussion of Hamlet among Sophomores. So therefore, we consider the correct answer should be C, right? Which is aligned with the author's perspective that young minds can demonstrate wise moral discrimination, whereas option A and option B and C considered wrong and inaccurate. Hope you understood the question. So I believe that means, um, such kind of a passages may come up with a difficult vocabulary, but at the same time means they come up with a very simple and direct or um, direct questions come from the passage Only thing, a student who have a good command over the language as well as English language as well as the vocabulary one or English language, so then definitely he or she can avoid um, inaccuracy out of this question, right? Or can make 100% correct. So that's all for the day. Thank you.